Now, before we start, can we just acknowledge 24.5 degrees of heatiness? So I am currently like a worn out rag, you know, a damp squib. And what we have here is a slightly noisified green Rally. Plugged it in. Lots of distortion. Yeah, so look, we have a Rally GL300 here. This is a new acquisition of Dave's. We all know and love the Rally. What have we got? We've got all right. Oh, turn this off. I'm sorry. Off. Quiet. Yeah, we've got a Rally. Pretty looking thing. Green. Dave's collecting a whole pile of them, so he hasn't got the green colour, so now he has. Great big chunk of Les Paul. I mean, there's no kind of half measures on this. It's mighty thick. We've got decent-ish frets, nothing too bad about them, not too much wear anywhere. A bit grubby. Horrible plastic nut, always a letdown. And what's interesting about this one, apart from the fact that, if I just take out this jack socket a minute so I can turn it over, we've got chrome hardware and we've got cream plastics, and these Rallies, I mean, that's pretty on the back there, you've got to admit. Not too much reflections and stuff, but without the reflections you can probably see it's a nice looking kind of grain, nicely greened up, and the green is lovely all the way through the neck. Beautiful, made in China. Jinho is the kind of brand on the hardware. Pretty decent Grover copies. The reason we like our Rallies is because they always, well, from the first time ever I saw their face, I loved them. I thought they were great playing out of the box, in inverted commas. Really good quality, and they set up beautifully well, and you know, took upgrades in the pickups. But even the original stuff was fantastic. Now I'm just looking at these, and there's coverings still on this one, plastic, and I'm wondering whether that's a replacement, and this is the original sort of average chrome stuff here. But I don't know, you can probably see there's quite some angle going on there. So the question straight away is, what is with this? I mean, look how high the bridge is standing, and actually it's not a mile. I mean, it's a bit high, but it's not the highest thing in the universe over the top there. So we must have quite an extreme angle going on here, or something about the shape of this body is flattening out or something. It doesn't look too extreme an angle, but that's a really tall. I don't remember seeing them standing that tall before. No, this is definitely, I haven't seen it that tall. This is definitely the case. I mean, Dave, you can compare these to your other ones, because I think this is a slightly different beast. Yeah, I mean, you know, look at the difference in action, the height off the deck that the bridge is. Also, I find this wider than the average Rally, and the neck is chunkier than the average Rally. So maybe there's something about this green one that just has a slightly different build or something. I don't know. Anyway, I am boiling hot in here. It's going to go up from 24 degrees, because as soon as I'm in here, if it's 24 and I do some work in here, it's 25 before you know it. It just gets warmer, which is great in the winter, but not so good in the summer. I'm had a difficult couple of days. Unfortunately, you won't see this until a bit later on when I get the... actually, you know what I'm going to do? I think I'm just going to do this single video as a setup. Am I going to put strings on? Well, yes and no. Let me just... Yeah. No, I'm going to need to take them off. So this... I'll have to do another part to this video. But anyway, when you see this, it'll be a few days afterwards. But in real time, where we are now, had a couple of difficult days. I was having a nice slow weekend prior to this week. I didn't have that much in the way of booked work, which is kind of comes and goes, and that's fine. So I was taking it easy and enjoying just lounging about. And I was actually lined up to go and do kayak down in Falmouth. I was hoping, well, we'd check the wind and keeping a close eye on things, and we were going to go today. And yeah, yeah, get down to what do you call it? Down to Falmouth. We're going to go and just pootle around the harbour, looking at the yachts and aquatic life, and maybe end up on the beach side of the town. But and the what do you call it? The wind would have been just about right for it, nice and light. It would be about the second ever time we got our kayak out, but you know, neither of us are in too fantastically good health. But anyway, so the idea was to do that, and then I got some work out the way yesterday to clear the decks, and then yesterday I did something to my back and couldn't do anything, so I had to cancel today, and I'm only got enough to do this setup tonight and pack a guitar for sending off tomorrow. But apart from that, so I'm annoyed because the thing I look forward to, and I'd kind of timed it and everything for the right day, and it was, you know, everything was just lining up. It's no big deal. It's not like going on holiday somewhere, but we were going to have a nice day out on the water, and I just couldn't do it. It wouldn't have been worth risking my health to do that. Look at this, I'm sweating, see? Come on, it's 24.5 degrees. So, yeah, so that's, instead I'm here setting up the Rally. I had a funny thing when I went down to get a prescription for some painkillers for this back, and I took them to Morrison's, and I waited in the queue, and when the lady fulfilled the order, gave me the painkillers, I said, "Oh, I have a prepayment certificate." And she said, "You don't need to do that, dear." She said, "You're over 60. I thought, what? Me? Yeah, so you really do get to know your age, don't you, when you least want to take it on board. Anyway, so this is the Rally. The strings are filthy, so I don't really know. Don't know whether anything's been changed around. The switch was a little bit sticky, so I'll do some spraying of that. So what Dave wants for this is we're going to do a low action setup as normal. We'll check out, see whether that's the original pickup or not. We'll clean up the electrics and make sure the switch is nice and working. And we'll set it up with a new adjustable Tusq nut, as always. And then we'll go for some 10s, restring it. But I will wait to do that until a new roller bridge arrives and a Göldo Les Trem from Thomann, because Dave likes those on his Rally guitars. There's a kind of, all of them seem to have it. So the bridge has been, the bridge pickup's been pushed up to give it a bit more bite, and the neck is down quite low, but they seem fairly balanced. I mean, there's more in the bridge. Not in tune very well, but I don't want to do anything with it because I don't want to tune it too much, because if I do, what will happen is I'll break the strings and then I won't be able to use them for the precision fret leveling part of things. So I'm going to stop making noises right there. Just putting a guitar on is boilingly hot. Okay, so the usual thing then, I guess we'll do the nut first. and then we'll do the fret leveling, because we can do that with the same bridge on. So we'll take the action down, we'll get the nut ready. So here we go, we've got our bass. I'm hoping that I sent a bass or sold a bass to a customer and Reloved Guitars supporter in Oregon in the United States, which is great. It's really nice. Really nice to be able to help people out like that. I tend not to sell them in the UK because the thing is I have to make them I have to make it worth my while in order, sorry, you can see here, I have to make it worth my while to sell a nut bass. Sorry, people ask if they can buy a nut bass, and my typical reply is, well, not really. I have a limited supply. Be much happier to sell you a ready to drop in or drop in ready nut for your guitar. So I tend to sell or send the insert plus the bass ready cut to precise dimensions for their guitar, and hopefully the idea is to add some value to that, so it isn't just me selling bits of plastic that really I can't afford. I mean, I don't have an infinite supply, and also I really don't want to, I can't, it's not worth even the trouble of going to the post office and so on and so forth. So just being realistic, I try to minimize it, or try to limit it to only doing it with quite a bit of added value thrown in. But of course that isn't cheap, but it doesn't seem to have been a problem for the people who get the principle and really want it. Haven't really ever had much of an issue price-wise, so that's good. So I'm able to help some people. And there's somebody parking up outside with a bike, and it just makes me jealous. I haven't ridden for years. Whose is that? Will that be? Don't know. Could be my downstairs neighbour, possibly. So what I'm doing here is I'm just building up a little footing of brass to go in the bottom of the nut in the base. Just helps to kind of helps to add a little bit of reinforcement, so that when the feet stand on it on the base, they don't poke their way through. I also am about to sand them flat so they don't. It spreads the load better. Now, speaking of adjustable Tusq nuts, it's great to see in my feed, YouTube feed the other day, a very recent interview between I've forgotten the name of the guy who runs the podcast, but a music podcaster, and Andy Partridge, formerly of, or currently still of XTC. And it's a very nice podcast interview about how Andy wrote and writes songs. So great for fans of XTC and just general musicians alike. But I was very pleased to see that Andy's was sort of lined up to do this podcast sitting on his bed, or a bed or sofa, lounge, I can't remember which. But he had two guitars lined up to use, and the one that he played almost the whole of the time was a Harley Benton, and it wasn't just a Harley Benton, it was the Harley Benton that I set up for him a couple of years ago. And among other things, I could tell by the fact that I could see the adjustable Tusq nut on it still doing its dutiful service. So it was great to see that, and Andy on the video made a big point of saying that, he said something like, for all you guitar snobs out here, I'm going to demonstrate all of my songs on the cheapest guitar I ever bought, the Harley Benton. So I thought that was great, and very fun for me to see, a guitar I set up. Funnily enough, actually, I was quite critical when I heard him. He did a lot of playing with it with the volume turned down, and I could then sort of hear much better how hard he hits the guitar. And actually, if I'd have known how hard he hits the strings, I probably would have not originally set such a low action. But we live and learn, don't we? Because he's a quite hard hitter, fretter. Anyway, so I'm going to. Yeah, it was a very, by the way, very interesting podcast. Anyway, I really like the way he kind of sees things. He talked a bit about synesthesia, and he sees every piece of music that he was talking about seemed to have I'm not quite sure if it's a sort of visual form to it that he described it as but it was a thing as well as being music or a sound. Every chord was such and such, made him either conjured up a feeling or a picture. Very interesting, and I could really get it. So he would describe a chord as this is a cigar smoke and chandeliers chord. He didn't say that, but that kind of thing, and you could absolutely top description. It really made sense. Anyway, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tap off this nut. But interestingly, if we zoom in, it's 24.5 degrees. This whole place might just melt down shortly. So there's you can see it's quite easy to see on this now how these get fitted and how easy it is. You can see how this finish runs up the front of this nut, and it's kind of risky business. There's also some splashing colour gone on the front of the nut there, but you can see that this either is stuck to it or there's a gap. I'm not really 100% convinced there's much of a gap, or it could be quite stuck. So if we tap this, we may find that there's some sort of breakage unless it's very lightly affixed. So we either take our cutting disc to it and try and remove it that way, or we do this and give it a little sort of a tap and see it move, and it does move. And with a bit of luck, we should be able to, I don't know if you can see this now, we should be able to perhaps tap it out like so, protecting the other parts. So that's not bad. But if you look at it from the other side, you really can see the way that the finish goes up the face of the nut. Can you see that? Like a wave of a great wave of rising wave of clear finish, or sorry, black with clear coat on top of it. And same there. It's about a millimetre or two tall. So that's just dying to break. And if it's stuck to it, which often it is, that can lead very quickly to the finish snapping off. Now, what we're doing that for is just to check the replacement, and as it happens, that is a nice replacement fit. I've already sanded it down a little, so I'd be happy for that. It's a fraction loose actually, but it will do. So when I'm at the thing here, I might as well take the opportunity to mark up the frets ready for leveling, and then we can get that bit done, the sort of main part of the setup, if you like, the heart of the setup. One of these days I will end up with a Rally GL300 myself. It just never comes at the point where I've got a capriciously easy come easy go bit of money kicking around, spare money. It's not a, when you're the one earner in the family sort of thing, and there's only you and the number of hours you work at something, then it's difficult to have, you don't expect to be a guitar setter up and have lots of income floating about. It pays the bills really, which is nice. Not worse ways to pay the bills, but so I rarely have spare cash floating about. So just tune these up. going to get approximately to pitch, I should say. That's an incredibly low action, but that's cool. So it'll get a bit lower in a second now when I lower the last fret action. But before I do that, let's check the neck, check the relief in the neck. So what have we got? I would say that's flat as the day is long. So I think we need a bit of relief in there. There's no point starting out dead flat like. So for a bit of relief, we're going to put in, if we can reach it. Oh, what have you done? That's a funny access. I don't know if we can reach that. That's very odd. Ooh. That truss rod is sunk in below a little ledge. We may struggle to reach it. Oh dear, hold fire. So I can see that somebody's painted in this cavity. Yeah, do you know what? I don't actually think I can get this with a hex key. Gonna have to come up with Encore India. That's too chunky. That's not the right key. I'm going to try the various things. It's hard to tell what size it is, and I can never remember. But that is that going to go in? Nope. Dear me. Right. So we've got no clear access to this between the edge of this thing here and the fact that that's put in a ditch. So there's not really a lot of access, which could explain why it hasn't been adjusted. So I'm going to have to figure out an approach. It wants to be lower than that. This needs to be cut away a little bit. I mean, it's going to be underneath there anyway, but I think we're going to have to do it because there's no access. Oh yeah, somebody out there weighing their truck. Now let's get a little drilly thing. We could use one of those, or we could use a little drum. The drum probably do a better job. Right. Yes. So access to your truss rod is kind of vital, and if you don't have it, you can't make an adjustment. And so this is, I think there's something built up in, it could just be paint and finish that's built up in here, but we can't push the that thing over it. Can't get the hex key to go over it. We might be able to just chisel it out, but we might as well start with a little bit of help with this thing. Now remember, this is under, I'm going to hold it down here, you can probably still see, yeah. So I'm going to just flatten out the bit that's preventing the angle being right, like so. Don't mind the strings. Getting a better reach on it anyway. gives me far better access to the thing. We've still got this grime sticking up into there, which I probably ought to just get a chisel to, small fine chisel to, just to clear up the clumps. Again. Oh God, what is that? Finish. Big blocks of finish in the way. Bits coming out. Right, let's have a feel. Oh yes, much better. Let's try a key. It's a very strange angle for this thing to be fitted in. Okay, see, I got an angle on that now. Okay, ooh, adjusted. So, whilst, you know, that's an invasive thing, obviously when we come to replace that, it won't have any effect whatsoever. We're just giving ourselves access by clearing out some of the build gunge that's under there. So now, having tweaked it a little bit, and now created a gap, which is about enough, just enough. Okay, so the next bit, are we still zoomed out? Yes, we are. The next bit comes the height, which is way too big. I've lost that screwdriver as well. Weird world. Oh, blimey. Mind you, this is still very high, even after taking down the action. So here we're at 1.5 exactly. Here we're at 1.2, which is where I would take it. So what I'm also going to do, since we're stuck with this action, I'm going to raise up the stop bar action, because I feel that this is too, it just seems too extreme. This is going to be irrelevant a bit later on when we put the Les Trem thingy on, but this is massively tight angle, so I think we can really do without that. Blimey, it's still pretty extreme. Like I say though, it will be a irrelevancy later on. Okay, a bit less. Okay, so we've got our first fret action, or we've got the relief set. Tiny bit more than nothing. Totally flat action, lovely. So a little tiny bit of relief, a tiny bit more than none is my guideline. We've got a very light, a very low first fret action thanks to the adjustable nut, and we've got that target last fret action, which is the 1.5 on the bass side and 1.2 on the treble side. So I'm going to straight away throw that plastic nut away, because we don't ever want anything to do with that again. And, sorry about this beeping. I told these people years ago that the thing needs changing in the thing, and they still haven't got around to doing it. It's obviously not a problem for them, and it's nothing I can sort of take apart and do without possibly cutting off all their power supplies or something. So beeping onwards we shall get, unless I send them another email and say, okay, it may be no issue to you, but beeping's driving me mad, driving me mad. I am boiled. But that's the way it is. It's 24.5 degrees in here still. So we're ready to do the leveling of the frets. Fairly fresh paper here, and this is always the the miracle bit, really, I suppose, the precision bit that gets us the leveling we want. I recently, I just yesterday redid Aaron's PRS. It was an interesting one. I'm going to say it like it is because I don't want anything I say to be taken as a criticism of Aaron's choice, or blimey, what's going on here? We got some sort of weird. Right, just before I get onto that interesting little story, there's something going on around here. I am not making contact with that middle thing. So have we got some? First of all, some totally bizarre. We have got a fair bit of relief, but it's not that much. Well, that's increased since a minute ago, so that's a little bit of a delayed reaction. How strange is that? Okay, well, let's get our key back in there if we can. Get in there if we can. And straighten it out a bit again. That was very odd. Right, we'll go for that. Yes, so just so that was a good example there, by the way. When you're using this method, if something doesn't feel quite right, it's stop and reconsider. So that alerted me to a small change in the relief that I hadn't seen or was fresh. Now this is interesting now, because this would seem to me quite a bigger bend on the truss rod than appears to be on the actual neck itself. Now that's now gone slightly over, so that's quite interesting. Anyway, yeah, so I don't know if you remember, I think it might have been off camera anyway. Right, I'm going to go with that, but something about this is weird. Right, yeah, so I did I'd done a couple of, it was my second refret for Aaron. First one was an Ibanez. Important bit is to remember it was an Ibanez with a composite neck, laminate neck. Anyway, so I did that refret, and in that case I had the guitar body and I kind of set it up with the strings on and sent it back, having done a precision level as opposed to just an overall fret level with a radius block, which you often might want to do after you've done a refret. And certainly if you only had a neck only to work with, you'd have to, that's the only leveling you could really do. So he really liked that, particularly the fret end treatments. So he sent me another one, and the other one was a PRS, and that happens to be see, look at that, hardly any, really low action and hardly any leveling required, and it's playing nice so far. Anyway, yes, so he sent me the PRS in a sort of state of build, so it was no pickups, no electrics, no other hardware other than the bridge and the tuners, and so I refretted that and set it up to my normal action, which was this same 0.3 over the first fret, a tiny bit of neck relief, more than zero, and 1.5 on the last fret. In this case that was a 24 fret on the last fret, over to 1.2 on the high one, and sent it back. And because it was a refret, obviously I leveled down to that target action, and if it plays at that target action, I don't level below that if we're not going below that. So I sent it back to Aaron, and he contacted me and said his kind of, in short, it was his target action was 0.9 millimeters on the, I guess I assume on the treble side on the last fret, and he was also felt that the first fret action was higher than the 0.3 or than I had set on the Ibanez neck. And so, being me, I immediately said, look, just send it back if I'll see what I can do to make it play. And, you know, I always do that on the basis that if there is something that's not quite right with how I've done it, you know, it's not a cheap exercise, I will redo it, or, you know, if it needs further leveling, I will go a little bit beyond my my kind of normal conservative leveling. I always try to err on the side of saving fret metal, hence this method. Anyway, so I got it back, and he'd kindly and usefully actually set it at the kind of action level that he was after. And the thing that struck me first of all was that it was around about 0.9 or even possibly fractionally less on the bass side and the treble side. And I could hear there was a little bit of choking out on one of the frets here, and in the other places that he'd picked, you know, he'd got it to choke. But the thing that really struck me was I kind of thought, well, that's actually not an action. I have to be honest, that's not an action I would ever aim for, because it's, you know, there's a reason I stopped at 1.5 and 1.2. Brilliant, I'm happy with that. Anyway, yeah, there's a reason I kind of set that action. So since I had it back, and since I realized that actually what we had was a slight mismatch of expectations here, you know, I was, you know, he's a good customer, and I love doing refrets, and, you know, I'd really enjoyed doing the other one for him and this one, this PRS. So I was more than willing to basically level it more, knowing basically that I don't normally aim for that low, and I wouldn't really be comfortable promising I could make something play that low, and also because on B, the other bit being, I actually do tend to wimp out on the leveling a little bit. I tend to err on the cautious side, so I recognise there is a little bit more I can do. You know, I can always hit it a little bit harder if we want a little bit lower action, if that's really important to him. So I did that yesterday or the day before, I can't remember now. An extra, you know, hour or two's work on it, all told, and some new strings, and yeah. So it kind of just raised the thing for me. I mean, first of all, I tried to figure out what made Aaron think that that was an action that I would be able to deliver on, since I never promised that kind of action. And then I tried to sort of think about the differences between the Ibanez, you know, because I think that he felt the Ibanez, if I didn't level it for that action, at least it seemed to go to the action he was aiming for. I guess the first thing that occurred to me really was that the Ibanez was a multi-part laminate neck, which sort of, in my experience, tends to then smooth out, makes a smoother curve. It cures or corrects or prevents some of the kind of bunching and wrinkles that you get when you put a regular wood and rosewood two-piece neck, you might call it, under load. So I kind of thought maybe actually that might be part of the story here, is that the first one I did for him was by definition and had a slightly more precise curve, relief curve to it, by virtue of the fact that it is a laminate neck, and of course the PRS wasn't. It was this sort of construction, straight piece of wood with another piece of wood on top. So I thought, well, that's the first thing, and it's probably, you know, why I say I don't target that kind of action, even though I know that on some guitars like SGs, for various reasons, partly because the neck's outside the body, la la la. Wow. Partly, sometimes you can get an SG down to that 1mm sort of action, but 0.9 is, it's not a realistic target, I have to say. However, I leveled for as close to that as I could get, and I think it's about 1 anyway now, so I got it to as near to his target as desired, and I think that when I look at it now, it's not really something I was obliged to do, because it's a mismatch of expectations. I think I don't ever promise to be able to level to that playing action, but having done that, I think it makes decent sense to do that, because he's been a good customer, and you know, I hope to do more refrets at a future time, because it's a nice process I enjoy. So just a little interesting one from a luthier. I don't call myself a luthier, but a tech's point of view. Now this one, I have to say, is almost on the ground, so I'm just going to lift this a tiny fraction. Yeah, so I guess it's one of those things where somebody might say, well, you shouldn't have to do that, it's ridiculous. No, it's not. Don't feel obliged. But I think it's you know, I think what's missing is being clear about it. Yeah, it's important to get really clear about what the customer's expectation is, particularly because it would be better for me to save time to have gone after that target to begin with, but with the kind of caveat that says, look, I really don't know that I'll be able to achieve this action for you, because it's not an Ibanez laminate neck, it has limitations, and because I only ever aim for this, that, or the other, there's a reason why, and that's the reason. So, the lesson of that for me cost me, just a couple of hours and a bit of postage back. But actually, that's a small price in the long run. Really, it's not a huge cost. Just what I'm doing, because the nut I'm putting in is slightly wider, I'm just retweaking these so they fit the holes on here, and it just means taking a little bit off the back end of this cover. Oops, there goes my fingers as well. So just before I came up here, I saw a news flash come in on my news apps and whatnot, that the wicked Wagner mercenary army leader Evgeny Prigozhin apparently was shot down in his private jet over Russia today, which I have to say is not an unpleasant thing to hear. And you might say, oh, that's terrible to wish ill on somebody, but this is a person who, if it's true that he's being disposed of, which it will almost certainly be by Putin himself, then the man lived by the sword and died by the sword, and he was about to get stuck into bringing his unique brand of love and compassion to Africa, if we were to believe what he was telling us, and that's a pretty disastrous thing. So I can't say I'm sorry at all. Okay, so just as a thought, if you fix an adjustable nut, always a good idea to remove the strings outside in from one side at a time, because then what you do is you leave the two middle strings on removal, and that stops the nut pinging off somewhere you don't want it to go. Even if the base part is glued in, which it will be, the top part is still loose, it's meant to be, because it comes out and rises up and down, so you don't want it springing off and whizzing around the room. Whoops, so there's our nut ready to be glued in at a later date. I'm now going to cut the strings off. Yeah, so yeah, I'm not normally, rarely am I pleased to hear of the demise of a human being, but the man, like many involved in the Russian invasion and the ongoing imperialism, we might say, of the Russian Federation, is a bit of a monster. And then I know there's without doubt there will be people who think that's a completely ridiculous view, and it's all made up for me by the lizards or whatever. But I can't be bothered with that sort of complicated. I'll forgive Putin his invasion of a sovereign country because I don't like Biden, or I prefer Trump, or I identify with something else. Those things never add up to it's okay to invade a country the way they did and will do again. So anyway, the guy was a monster, and if he has gone, then he's gone the way that he was always going to go anyway, which is you're never going to be around into your dotage to enjoy your billions of stolen monies, basically stolen from the Russian people, or looted from any country that you go in to help, in inverted commas, rescue. Anyway, so yeah, you sort of look at the man. I kind of look at him on his endless PR videos and think to myself, you have very different desires from life to me, my pal. You aren't going to be around to put your feet up in a hammock and enjoy watching the sun go down and contemplate your life achievements, because you're going to be destroyed one way or another in violence that you profit from, and it's always the way, it seems. Now that doesn't mean along the way that a load of innocent people aren't worse treated, but it does generally mean that the warmongers end up paying a pretty harsh price. But then I don't think they would be happy swinging in a hammock in their back garden in Devon. Looking forward to doing a green Rally GL300 setup at the end of the day with a slightly painful lower back. And that wouldn't be enough. He wanted to see millions of dollars in cash in his apartments or his office that was raided by the Russians after his little coup d'etat, failed coup. Yeah, and apparently, if you believe anything, they took away several millions in cash, US dollars. Anywho, so I hope it's true that he's gone and he won't be, as he said on his video the other day, allegedly from Africa, apparently standing in a bit of deserts with full heavy European battle gear, claiming to be in 50-degree heat without a drop of sweat on his face. I'm thinking, that is never 50 degrees temperature in somewhere in Africa. The guy would be roasting. Anyway, so I don't even think he got it as far as Africa, but in his video he was talking about bringing love and happiness to Africans. I mean, what a revolting abomination of the words, really. Anyway, so that was the news just before it came out. It could, for all I know, it could be completely fake, and it could be someone else. I know that apparently the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has been missing for 3 weeks since he apparently made a bit of a faux pas where when a Western journalist asked him about the upcoming, next year's Russian elections, or later this year I think they start, but anyway, the elections, and he said something like, "Oh, it's not a democracy here anyway. Putin's going to win." And apparently, I don't really see why that would upset Putin, since it's absolutely the truth, and I don't think he really ever does much pretending otherwise. But suddenly, he doesn't get seen for 3 weeks from that point, which is weird. Now, having done the crowning, we've got the whole of the sanding out business to do, which is always the sort of boring, noisy thing with masking tape and whatnot. But while I'm here, I did want to look and see if we can see what's happening, or what's the story with this pickup. See if it's the same typical Rally, or if it's been changed. I'll probably take off the plastic, because it's like having the plastic on your car seats, which is a very Alan Partridge thing to do. Speaking of which, can't wait for the new Partridge audiobook that's coming out in October. Got it on pre-order. I love Partridge. I can listen to them time and time again. There's something new every time. Pow. Okay, here it goes. Unmarked. So that's probably not an upgrade to something else. It's probably just didn't bother taking the plastic off, which I will do. Okay. There's no Seymour Duncan such and such, Kent Armstrong type thing. So I guess it more than likely would be the original. Just was kind of wondered why A, it was so low, and B, it was covered in plastic. But it's no big thing. So that's enough. I will probably raise it a little bit higher to balance out the volumes. But then again, that's a personal preference. Some people don't want them balanced quite that way. They want a bit of bite on the bridge when flipped and playing. Anyway. So yeah, found out today that I'm officially old at 60 in a way that I hadn't even thought. I just had to suck it up. So what am I going to do here? Right, well now what I'm going to do is, I guess I'll just put on all the tape, and we'll pull off some, we'll get the little thin bits of tape, masking tape. So it's the usual thing of protecting the fretboard. Funny enough, I see lots of people do fret levelings and they don't bother this bit. They just don't. They go over the top of the fingerboard, and I guess they figure that if they end up going down through the various grades of grit, it'll end up smoothing out the fretboard finish as well. But it's just a bit odd for me. And then some people like me do this religiously always, so I guess it's a habitual thing, isn't it? Anyway, so what do we got? Well, 24 and a half still. Oh no, 24.6 degrees still, so it's still warm. So I'm going to do this bit of polishing out, and I'm going to leave this up here for the arrival of the Duesenberg, no, not Duesenberg, the Göldo Les Trem. There must be some sort of license agreement with Duesenberg, who originally came up with it. The Göldo one is a slightly more sort of jazzy looking thing. Not as I don't know what you'd call it, mod looking as the Duesenberg one, but it's essentially the same tremolo. And they're great because they're very easy to use tremolo, and they're very easy to fix. You just remove the stop bar, and they sit on the stop bar posts, and that's that. As complicated as it gets, really. So we're going to fit that when it arrives, but it's coming from Thomann, so I kind of don't expect it to be. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little bit later than everything. And then the bridge is a straightforward swap over, and then I mean, I could do all of those things at home, but I guess I'll leave it here so I at least make myself complete the video. Otherwise, it's just a partial setup and modification. But as always with rallies, this has turned out to be an extremely low action playing guitar. you know, and it, for some reason, I've never found the Rallys have any major hills and valleys. They're really, I don't know what it is, whether it's the wood they chose to use in the manufacture of the necks. It's very, very uniform level, and we don't have any problems with all of these sort of ups and downs that need to be tamed through the leveling process. They're usually good enough to play right off the peg, and I'm only ever improving them for, you know, ultra low action with no bends, no choke on any bends, that kind of thing, for a really low action. So I'm refining it, I would say. But they have to be good to begin with, and that's what I've always found with these, and I did my bit to sort of sing their praises when I first came across them about 5-6 years ago now, I guess it was, years ago, when I first had a red one, which is what David's still looking for. Yeah, I had a red one, kind of red flame looking thing like this, and you know, I was blown away. I thought, this is as good a Les Paul copy as I've ever laid my hands on, and so I got hold of a few more just to try and see if they were all as good. And lo and behold, this model, the GL300 Les Paul type guitars, they all were as good as each other. And there was another one called a GL400, which was a slightly, I guess it was meant to be a bit more upmarket, but it had a bit of gold fittings and double binding, I think. But generally speaking, they all were fantastic, and they kind of sang their praises, and they started to get popular, and then I started not to be able to get them for that lovely knockdown price that I used to be able to find them for, because of course to the snobs they were just an unknown brand copying Gibson, and of course if they're not Gibson, they're crap, and end of. And used to be able to get them for really good money. I think I probably paid about 110 quid for mine, or 120, something like that. It was, and I know Dave's found the first one that Dave had in his collection, I got for, I think it was 100 quid, you know, and it's one of the best of them. Lovely thing. So this one, I guess from some hint of the auction closed price, I think was quite a bit more, but that's probably because the few of us that have gone overboard on the rallies end up sort of pushing the prices up a bit, because as soon as somebody figures that there's a community out there that likes them, then you're going to quite rightly ask for a bit more money for them. Anyway, so, but they're still fabulous guitars. I mean, I don't know I've never found a way in which a Gibson is better than these. Now, I'm not the best person to judge pickups, but I've never really played a Gibson and said, oh, those pickups are a million miles better than that Rally that I've got over there. Occasionally you hear some pickups, some Gibson pickups that do just sound great, but I'm not the best person to judge, so I'm quite willing to believe there is a qualitative difference in pickup tone on a expensive American-made Gibson. But apart from that, the solidity of this build, the chunky rock and rolliness of this shape, and the look of it and stuff, I think this is a fantastic budget Les Paul style guitar. And you would have to play a long time before you outgrew the capability of this guitar. Simple as that. I mean, there's nothing about it that restricts you in a way that for some reason a Gibson wouldn't. You know what I mean? The Gibson isn't qualitatively immediately that much better that you go, oh, I've got to have one of these because my music making is hampered by this non-American, Chinese-made Rally. I just can't be the guitarist I want to be because I don't have a Gibson. It's not a case with this. This is superb. Okay, so I'm just covering up. I'm covering up those just to keep the possibility of any scratches coming off the paper as I go over the top of the frets. It's not because I'm worried there might be magnetic pickup dust falling on the, not pickup dust, fret dust magically falling on the thing, because it doesn't. There is no magnetism. Fret dust is not magnetic, for the millionth time. Now, here's a nice thing. I've got some new, that's about 10 quid's worth of micro mesh. It's so expensive these days. It's not very funny. So I'm just going to do my normal thing, and I change this a little bit over time. So what I'm starting out with is I'm going to, first of all, do a little bit of end-to-end polishing, just to kind of take off any sharp bits right on the fret edges and try and eradicate any obvious big scratches along the top. Now I have to be careful, obviously, to keep the amount of pushing and sanding here fairly even. I don't want to change the relative levels of the frets in doing this, so I'm trying to be considerate of how I sand and how I press down and so on, but I think it helps to get rid of what sometimes can be a tiny gritty feeling that you can end up with if you just go longitudinally, funnily enough. So going across the frets, so going longitudinally with the frets, I think this possibly helps to just get rid of some of that scratching that may otherwise somehow still remain there. So that's my longitudinal with the frets sanding, and then what I'll do is, then I like to do is take the same bit of paper and I like to basically run over the frets with my fingers, and I'm feeling them and I'm looking at the scratches on the frets. And of course the same thing applies. It's 400 grit, so we want to be cautious or consider the, not taking down any one set of frets more than any others. But this gives me a sort of an all over look and feel, see if there are any big scratches that I'm not addressing or haven't addressed before I move to the foam block. And then probably doesn't do any harm to run it the other way. So I'm sort of able to dig my fingertips in a little bit. Go away from me. Moth. Oh, mosquito-y fly. Thank you. Okay, so with my very first bit of paper, I've sort of taken off all the pen that I can see, and I've gone over everything to smooth everything out, to take care of most if not all of the scratches I can see. I'm a bit short on drink, I didn't bring enough. Oh Christ. So that's my quick refresh. I've probably got one more after that and then run for the hills. Okay, so now I switch to the foam block. This is just boring and noisy, basically. And dusty, of course. You notice I put my hands down here to stop the sandpaper running off and touching the headstock. It's kind of easier to do that than it is to tape off the entire headstock. So now I go on to 600 grit. Ooh, got some new glasses coming in a couple of weeks' time, and did a eye test. This is, I think, the first one in about 4 years. Well, yeah. Anyway, it's been overdue. So I've got having a replacement set of varifocals, which is what I'm wearing now. And then I've also ordered a pretty hefty reading prescription, basically a bit like these that I use call my granddad glasses. You know, the idea being for close-up work, but these are so much out of whatever the word is, prescription now, that I can use them, but they're not great. But you can see the reading prescription in the left eye is pretty chunky, or the up close thing. Anyway, the new ones will be a much better prescription for that, so I can look at my last fret actions in greater magnification or greater clarity than before. I'm looking forward to that. So that's the 600s done. And now the 1000s, and then there's 2 of each grade, as you can see. So the 1000s followed by the 1500s, followed by the micromesh set, which goes from 1500 through to 12,000. I was really annoyed with myself today that, sorry, now we're on to the 1500s. I was very annoyed that I'd kind of lined up for this, you know, carefully plotted and planned out kayaking trip, and I really hated the fact that my health and my physical health got in the way of it. It's very, you know, presses buttons that you have to accept you can and can't do. So see how lovely and dark this paper becomes after this much rubbing with. I'm breaking a bit off my block. Yeah, it gets very blackened, which is a good sort of indication that who would want all of that dirt on your fretboard, or rubbed into your fretboard, for example. Not me. So once I've done this, God, I'm just looking at the bits of gun. Oh, it's like soft gunge in here. It's like unset finish. It's a real mess. I don't know if somebody's poured something in here and tried to fill it up or something. Anyway, we've got access to it now finally. Yes, once this is done, then the bulk of the work is done on this. It's just a matter of waiting for the 2 new hardware bits to arrive, and then pick another evening. I come up here to do something else to fit them to it. So I'm determined to go and get that kayak in the water in the next week or 2 before the season's all gone. This sort of had a kind of feeling that originally we wanted to go down at the same time as the tool ships were in Falmouth, but then, you know, it would be hugely packed with tourists, and the wind wasn't right, and it was too gusty, and, you know, going out in the harbour, or the bay harbour, Falmouth Harbour, yeah, going out there in the big wind, it just push you places and make it hard to get back to base and stuff. So it was really about avoiding the crowds, and then after that waiting for the right sort of weather day. It doesn't have to be sunny, but it just needs to be not windy. And so today was the day, the last day I could see for some time on the radar, but you know, maybe in a couple of weeks we'll find a quiet greyish, not too cold day and go and enjoy being out on the river or the bay in peace and quiet. I've recently had a couple of interesting extra wide 6-string or 7 to 6 conversion requests, which hopefully might come to fruition in a few weeks' time, or might start up as jobs in a few weeks' time. It's very interesting. There's a lot of different options and possibilities for a 7 to wide 6 conversion, and some of them can be really straightforward and some of them can be really complicated. So the advice I sort of gave yesterday was to one person inquiring was, think about it from whether you're focused on getting the least expensive conversion you can, in which case money's the focus and you tend to have to work with whatever guitars are most suitable and require the least amount of substantial modifications, or the other way around, whether there's a particular model style of guitar you want converting, in which case you may end up having to spend more because you may not be so suitable for modification. So funnily enough, in the whole list of suitable 7 strings to 6 to convert, one of the very best ones, actually, if you don't mind having a fanned fret, was a Gear for Music guitar, because the fanned frets partly solve the problem of the bridge. So you can drop out one of basically the fan fret has 7 individual saddles, which you can lift each one and move, or drop one out and reposition the other 6. So that solves the bridge end of things with minimal adjustment to the body. But that, you know, and the pickups were suited too because they were non-pole paste, the pickups didn't have poles on them, so they were more like EMGs, like a solid cover. So you didn't have the problem of, you know, if they were rails underneath the cover, you didn't have either the visual problem of the pickups looking like they were out of place on the strings when you've changed it to a 6 from a 7, and you also don't have the very slight phasing, occasional phasing thing that some people can hear as the strings move in and out of the magnetic fields across a 7-pole pickup when you've converted it to 6 strings. Anyway, so it was interesting to figure that out, that, you know, if you've got a set guitar you want to convert, then you may have to pay more to convert that guitar, or if you're just open to any guitar and or money is the, you know, the budget is the primary thing, then actually you could get a relatively inexpensive conversion and full setup out of a Gear for Music fan fret 7-string guitar, which would be quite an interesting or a nice test to do. I've never actually spent any time playing or working on or even playing a fanned fret guitar 6 or 7 string, so I'd be kind of interested to have a go. But the guitar itself is only about 200 quid, maybe 250 max. It's not really that expensive for a fairly decent start point for this conversion. So that's yeah, that'd be interesting. I still got the huge one that I made for Vince. You know, I'm just going to keep it listed, and maybe one day somebody of the right dimensions, the right proportions will come by. But I don't hold out a ton of hope for it. But it's not the end of the world. It's history, and you know, I didn't lose out on the cost of the parts or anything, so I'm not really that bothered. You know, yes, there was a lot of time spent in making it, but I don't consider time spent making things is ever bad. You know, time wasted. It's when you're making something, you're learning something. It's always good time, valuable time. And I learned a lot from doing that guitar. So again, not complaining at all. Would have been nice to have seen it go to its owner, but it is not to be, I don't think. Anyway, so now I'm going to I think what I'll do now is just clean off these frets, or the fingerboard I should more likely say, and then after that just give it a clean up generally all over, and then we'll hang it up ready for the additional parts, the tremolo and the replacement bridge. And once that's done, it's done. String it up, stretch out, strings intonate, and we're good to go. And I can be envious of this lovely emerald green loveliness. And I feel like I've done some work and not over pushed my poor knackered back, so I can go home and, well, book a courier and pack someone's guitar, Aaron's in fact, and get that ready for collection tomorrow. And then I feel like even though I've been injured or under the weather health-wise, I'll at least have done a setup and taken care of a return or send a dispatch, which I think I'll be pleased, even if I couldn't go kayaking, because it wasn't worth risking my back for that. Well, it wasn't my normally, I mean, I was tempted to just push it and go and see what happened, but I did have to think, if I can't work, if I knacker myself, then there's nobody to do guitars, then there's no income, and that's just it's not worth risking our well-being for being stubborn and going against what your body's telling you, which is to slow down and take it easier. Okay, so that'll probably just fall off, so let's put that upside down and we'll hang this up. There is a little thing I wanted to do on here, I don't know whether you'll see it. There's a bit of, on the edging here, there's a little bit of overlap, overspill onto the cream binding. It's hard to, if I take it off it lightens it, but if I leave it on it looks like it's bits of brown, but then I'll end up with a completely white looking, I guess I'll just leave it. Yeah, just end up with a very white looking, or a much whiter looking binding. It's just I don't know whether it's, what is it? Some sort of paste or something that came off the fingerboard. I don't know. Honestly, don't know. Just little gritty brown bits, same colour as the fingerboard. Anyway, it's only a minor thing, so I'm not going to mess everything up by chasing it. An aesthetic thing. I'm not even going to put strings on, oil on the fingerboard yet. I'll do that just before I put the strings on. What I think I will do briefly is get this off, and I'm just going to flip it over and we'll squirt some stuff in there. Just make sure. Ooh, look in there. We'll just get some contact cleaner in there, I think I'll take the Made in China off. It's a bit of a grubby looking thing. I'm not ashamed of it. These are great guitars made in China, but it's like a 1970s graphic we can do with that. Right, give me a... Oh, that's one. Contact cleaner. That's a duster. I need the cleaner. Give me the squirty thing. Kind of difficult to get this to work in enclosed small spaces. With contact cleaner, it helps when you spray it, you then work the switch a bit. If it softens up any grime on the contacts, then you tend to be able to help to clean it off by going backwards and forwards. And very definitely the case is true with pots. It's never enough just to spray the pot with some contact cleaner. You really have to work the pot a bit. Otherwise, the contact cleaner it may soften the grime that's coating the contact surfaces, but it won't make a long-lasting difference. So, right, that's actually fitted on quite tight. I'm not going to do anything because there was no crackling anyway, so it's not necessary. What I will do while we're still at it is I will take off, soften up and remove the Made in China. Speaking of whom, no, we're not going to bring up any presidents, past or present. Presidents. China. It's funny, although I can't stand Donald Trump for a number of reasons, which ultimately are only personal, and I certainly wouldn't ever expect to convince anyone who loves Donald Trump to see it my way, and I wouldn't even begin to start a conversation like that. But I think he was right, definitely right in one thing, and I thought so from the beginning. And that absolutely was the fact that the COVID came out of a lab leak in China, and he called it the Chinese virus or whatever. And I think he was absolutely right about that, but I still think he's a complete imbecile, and I can't stand the man. But doesn't mean I don't agree with him on lots of other things. But it's really weird. It doesn't seem that in this world anymore you can have contradictory views about the same person, or it seems like you're supposed to have one view and it covers everything. I don't know. I have complicated views, contradictory views on the same subject. There we go. Look at that green thing, fret leveled, polished out. Oh, I suppose I better put the let's before I finish up. Hold on. Might as well put the nut in place because we're going to go straight to. Sorry, sweaty me. We'll go straight to the stringing up and changing the bits afterwards. So let's get a bit of glue. I think these pots of glue are nearly past their sell-by date. So I'm going to do is I'm going to place a little bit of glue on the deck there, and a little bit of glue on the deck there. Can't even put the lid on that thing properly. And then I'm going to press in the nut dead center on there and give it a good press down, like so. Ta-da. Now, if I had strings, in some ways that would be easier because it would press it down, but you can see that the top is very easy to come off. Sometimes they're a little bit tighter than that and they don't come off so easily, but this one is one that does. But it'll sit up there out of the way nicely if I hang it up and not drop onto the floor. I hope. And just in case, I suppose I might be better off sticking a bit of green tape over it to be on the safe side. There you are. That's going nowhere. There's these three little bits here. Well, I'll just put them over in the side. Those are the bits. That's the truss rod cover. And we're ready to go. Thank you for watching this bit. See you for the final bit in a day or so. Oh my goodness, it's almost dark. And we're back again in the land of Rally. And the Göldo Les Trem has arrived. And also the Northwest Guitars bridge. So really, everything's done. I'm going to oil fretboard again. Let's get that sort of underway. And then really, it's a matter of fitting the bits. So let's get the new parts out. Oh, lovely. These bridges almost always come ready intonated. They're very good. I mean, you need a little tweak, but they're pretty good. So I can't remember. When was I last on this? Just a couple of days ago, day before yesterday. So what happened yesterday? Well, yesterday I went out and played with a new band, which is a nice little get together. It's a combination of a singer that I played with before in this area, and enjoyed playing with him. I thought we had a nice little band. We're starting to get good, like, you know, tried real hard, as what's his name said. But then Jimmy left and Jody got married. No, what happened is I fell out with the other guitar player, who was actually originally a bass player, but then he became a guitar player and I couldn't get on with him. Anyway, so that was that. And it's about 5 years since we were out playing, Gary and myself and the other few. Anyway, so it turns out that Stuart, a customer and friend of mine, local guy, sort of basically got out and hooked up with Gary and a couple of other people, and then in sort of conversation it came up a bit like, so do you fancy coming along? Or, you know, or I probably said more like, is there any room for someone else to come along and play? And so the rest is history, sort of thing, although now I've lost my mirror. Anyway, yeah, so it was, why not come along and play? So it was great. I really enjoyed that. I had a good play. It was kind of a strange night because there was another nice guy who was kind of playing with them or looking to play with them, but so we ended up being three guitarists, and the other guitarist had a seizure just as we were starting, and of course I don't know him. I only just met him, so I didn't know anything about his health or anything, and so I had no expectation of that happening, and we just launched into summer '69, as you do, and he had his Les Paul, Gibson Les Paul, plugged in and hooked up, and he kind of pitched forward, holding the guitar, and for a minute we all thought that it was an electric shock. So obviously he was convulsing and seizuring. So we there was quite a bit of kind of running around turning off electric things to make sure that it wasn't he wasn't being electrocuted, because none of us dared touch him until that point. So as soon as we got that all unplugged, we could go to his aid, and it turned out that it was a seizure, and poor guy, it lasted about 15 minutes of complete unconsciousness, followed by about 45 minutes of coming back to life, I don't think I've ever been up close with somebody having a seizure like that before, so let's just hope he's okay. His mum came. She's obviously used to looking out for him. She's got experience of dealing with him when he's had a seizure. So we were able to pack up all his stuff and make sure that his equipment was okay. And anyway, so he got off home safely and obviously could go and rest. Maybe we'll see him again at a later date, but anyway, so that was the start. That took up the first hour. And he seemed to have recovered and had gone off home and was being looked after pretty well. We carried on, and so we went through sort of first half of the set that they'd been working towards, and it was just, yeah, it was good. I mean, we were all a bit rusty, and because I think they've only got together once before, so really couldn't be expecting anything unusual or anything super good, but had a great time. So it was really nice. It was the best of how it felt before playing in Tavistock region with Gary. Very familiar, kind of old friends from the local area. Yeah, so enjoyed it muchly. So there you go. Look, in the time I've been telling you about that little event last night, I have fitted the Les Trem. Simple as that. What a great, classy bar. So I'm going to put in the nut at the other end. We've oiled the fingerboard. I think I will put the that thing that's known as truss rod cover back on. I think where the truss, the adjustment was just right. So this doesn't quite sit flat. It didn't before because it presses against the nut, and I didn't really want to shave off any more. It sits well enough to do up, as you can see. So right, so really that's the main business. I've been doing some other things here tonight. I've been what have I been doing? I've been preparing templates, making templates, and kind of making decisions, I suppose, on the build I'm doing for myself, which is a piece of wood that my mum bought me as a sort of, I guess, as a memento to her. Not that she's gone anywhere, just the now, but there you go, look at that. But so that now hang on, I don't want to do this. I want to do the D and the G first, don't I? Yes, you do, Sam. Yeah, so she bought me, or told me to pick a nice piece of wood. So I got a nice big chunker cherry, which I'm going to make into a jazz master shaped guitar, because I don't have an offset guitar to my name, and I didn't used to like them, but I've kind of grown to like them since. So this is a bit tricky with the doing up on these now. I'm just going to see if I can get you zoomed in a bit, something like that. Oh, there-ish. Yeah. So with the nut being loose and with the string kind of not being fixed in the back of the Les Trem, it's kind of difficult to pull this back one fret and hold it tight. So what I tend to do is pull it up a bit and keep it held, which I think is about the 1 fret's worth, but we'll just have to see. And then I start my wind on, so it's straight away under tension. It's probably a little bit less actually, but it'll still do. But yeah, a little bit difficult to keep it with the exact tension. So that's the D, and now I fit the next one for the G, which is a bit off the mark. Last night when I went to play, I chose to take my I think I called it LP1, my first Les Paul style build, which let's try and get a view on this. No, that's not a very good view. Sorry about this. I'm unable to let go of this at this point in time. What am I looking at? That down, up. Yes, so it's a single cut that I made and it was basically the first Les Paul shaped guitar that I'd ever made, and I made it from a piece of an old, that was that thing called pool table, which was really satisfying to use that up. So yeah, an old piece of good old-fashioned Honduras mahogany or something from the pool table, and the top I just chose randomly because I'd never used it before. I saw some advertised and I bought some London plain, which is I don't really know what it is. It's some people say it's a bit like, no, it's not sycamore, it's a weird thing. Anyway, I bought it, and it's quite interesting. It's a little bit soft for my liking, as a kind of surface, because you can get dents in it, but it's quite okay looking. It's not the most figured thing in the world, but there's been worse. It's quite a, it's made quite an attractive looking top anyway, for all its strangeness. I'm just going to cut that short before I slack it off. Yeah, so it was an interesting build because it was the first. I was really I wanted to set out to see how bad really a Chinese manufactured kind of AliExpress special Les Paul style neck could be, because I'd seen them at, for me it's always been interesting because to begin with I used to either upcycle necks, which I still like to do, which I've done for this cherry build, this offset that I'm doing, or I like to try and find decent quality ones made somewhere else and either upcycle them or modify them for my own purposes. And so what I sort of learned was that it was an interesting range of price points. So if you wanted something a bit better than the rock bottom AliExpress type of stuff, where they have all the weird brand names that don't make any sense. They just picked random letters from a Scrabble set in China factory somewhere, and they have all these weird names. And they're, you recognise if I said a paddle-headed Strat style neck for about 30 quid or 28 quid or 32 quid, depending on who's selling when. So there are various price points, but about 30 quid for a Strat style paddle head neck. I bought and used quite a lot of those in the past, and actually they turned out to be not at all bad, really. And then, but it was much harder, in fact almost impossible, to find anyone who makes and supplies glue-in type necks. So most of the necks you can buy from China are bolt-in things. Obviously they must make glue-in set necks for kits and so forth, but I couldn't seem to find a supplier of them. Whoops, there goes the thing come off. I let it come off the back. Yeah, I couldn't find a supplier of those from China, or anyone that was retailing them from the Chinese factories. So difficult to find, but I did manage to find some, and they weren't that common, and they ranged from anything from about 60 quid to 35. It was the cheapest I think I ever saw, and there was no real sense of any difference between them, but a very, very small choice. But I sort of honed in on what there was, and kind of they looked okay, and I noticed that they weren't beautifully finished or anything. They were mostly pretty much unfinished, and they had sort of averagey looking frets and often very dreary looking wood. Sometimes though it wasn't, at least it was a kind of a rosewood look-alike, which isn't too bad. Anyway, so I bought two, and I decided to make two guitars at once. One that I would not carve, one that I would finish in gloss poly by hand, because I wasn't yet up to spraying with cans and spending so much money on it. So I thought I'd do a hand finish in wipe on water-based poly. And then, yeah, so I bought two, and they were about like 35 quid each, so about 70 quid for the two. And now I'm missing a screwdriver. My trusty screwdriver is now gone into the wrong pot, and I can't find it. There's one. Anyway, yeah, so I got them, they arrived, and to my surprise, pleasant surprise, they were more or less not bad looking. And in terms of the manufacture, it was obvious that they'd been made with made to be glued in, which was good, which is what I was looking for, and they had the angle required for a typical Les Paul cut into the heel. So you know, it meant that you didn't have to calculate an angle in the neck pocket of your guitar and go through that commotion. It was sort of done for you by virtue of it being built into the neck. Now, that, of course, the first thing for me was, how accurate is that going to be, and is it going to really work out? And so I set about making these two guitars at the same time, and amazingly, it worked out really well. And you know, I made the two. I actually sold the one that was a beautiful honeyburst colour in finished in gloss. It wasn't machine perfect gloss finish, but it was a nice looking thing, and it felt great. Sold that, and I was going to sell the other one, which was a flat one and didn't have any contours. So I had a buyer for it, and I sold it to them, and they contacted me about a week after and said, I'm not happy with the way this feels, can I send it back? So I took it back and refunded, as I like to do. And I kind of put it on the back shelf or back burner. And I thought, I'll look at this later on. I was busy doing stuff. So anyway, I finally got round to looking at it. Yeah, I finally got round to looking at it and, you know, paying it a bit of attention, and most of it was great, except there was something up about the tuning, and I couldn't seem to get it to stabilize the tuning properly. So I kept fighting it for a bit and trying and looking, and you know, I redid a few little bits and pieces and changed bridge and stuff like that. And it eventually, I wasn't paying it full attention all the time. But at some point, a couple of weeks, few weeks later, I noticed something which had completely passed me by to begin with when I was making it, and that was that on that particular neck, and not on the other one because it played perfectly well in tune, but on the one I had on the flat slab body, the first fret was 2 millimeters too long in that direction, which you wouldn't notice really. It's not a visual thing you'd notice, and you wouldn't expect it. So I had to, you know, check very carefully to make sure I hadn't lost my mind, and sure enough, it was 2 mils too long. So I set up very carefully to cut it back, which I did. So now on my guitar there's a little extra gap on this side because the nut's gone that way by 2 mils. I don't mind that because it's a keeper now. But after that, it was fixed. And it turned into a guitar that I wanted to keep, and so I did. And then I paid it a little bit more attention in terms of the electrics. I think I added coil splits and stuff like that into the mix, and yeah, it's it's become a favourite of mine, and for some reason on that guitar I absolutely love playing the around this part of the neck. It feels even nicer than this kind of guitar, and the Rally's lovely, but on mine it seems almost perfect for playing, the feel of playing up at the right at the top end. It's almost like becomes a different guitar again when you get up in that region, which I think is great. But anyway, so it's a kind of lovely homemade sunburst. Oh wow. Of course, these strings are still brand new. I've got a couple more stretchings to do, but yeah. Anyway, so that's over time that's become, like a few of the Keeper guitars I've got, they've gone from being hated because there was just something not quite right about them that I hadn't got right or that I didn't like about them, and then because I sort of live with them a bit, then obviously they get time invested in them and care, and then they become reloved, if you like, even though I made them first. But it's great because I don't expect them to be perfect. And what I seem to find out, or I learn, is even, not even, I'd never expected to make a perfect guitar. When I make a guitar, they are just like any other guitar. It's imperfect until I put in the attention to the playability. And that never happens just by making it. Oh, beautiful. If you haven't used a Les Trem before, they're so simple and they're pretty elegant looking, and they work just effortlessly. With the roller bridge, which is why I made that changeover, but with that addition, roller bridge and Les Trem, why would you mess about with a Bigsby with all that scraping and squeaking and scratching? It's just not worth it. So this is really capable of having a really low action. And there's enough break angle here as well, because I made sure that when I put the Les Trem on, I did not put it on the washers that come with it. It doesn't have to stand on them, but I made sure it didn't, because I don't want the bridge starting up high. I want it as low as possible in relation to, the Les Trem, which is doubling as the stop bar, I want that as low as possible compared to the saddles. So I could do another stretching manually, and then we'll look to intonate. But I bet you these bridges are nearly ready, unless there's something about the construction of the guitar. Anyway, so yeah, last night I took my took that Les Paul 1, as I call it, and it was just fantastic. It's got rail hammer pickups, hyper vintage pickups, which I've liked since the day I got them a few years ago, several years ago now. Yeah, nothing clever about it, just hyper vintage, rail hammer hyper vintage pickups, with coil split independently, a master volume, a master tone, and yeah, it did everything I wanted. Really good guitar for the night. I mean, all that I was missing, if you like, was, I think I'd like to have another guitar on site to have standing by for different tunings of things. That makes me sound very clever and mysterious, but even something like Bad Moon Rising, that old cherry. It's better to have the guitar tuned to D, well, to a whole tone down on all the strings from standard. And that's not in tune, is it? Better to have it tuned to D so that I can play the D chord with an E shape, because there's a little fiddly bit that works best like that. Alright, let's do one more stretch while we're here, because it's never a bad thing. Yeah, so I'm thinking of, well, I come back home and sort of look around my keepers collection, and of course they're all guitars I've made myself, which is a really nice thing to know. You can choose from your own stuff and you're not taking a brand name. Oh, sorry, you are taking a brand name, but not a world famous one yet. Anyway, so I've kind of got an eye on, I mean, the typical thing would be the Les Paul shape style seemed to do everything really well last night, but then sometimes it's nice to have a Strat with single coils, and I either take my parts caster that I love, my red one, or I was thinking of one of my headless ones, which has a single coil in the neck position with a dummy coil on it to cut down the hum. So with that little arrangement, it's got a humbucker in the bridge, so I could play that all night if I wanted to, but it's also got a single coil in the neck position, which I can play without there being any 50 cycle hum. So that's a good option. Anyway, but it's also really small and neat, and it's got a fixed DiMarzio strap on it, which means I can just throw it around and never gets in the way of anybody else, and I can leap around. Well, not that I would be leaping around, but scratch the eye. You know, I can move around without any risk of hitting anything or anyone, which is actually quite a nice thing when you're on a little pub stage. Anyhow, so that's my kind of initial thought about another guitar to take along. But just having said that, I'd be just as happy to take along parts caster Strat. Having said that, there's a few others I'd be happy to take. Nearly spot on. Brilliant. Good old whoever makes them for Northwest Guitars. It's maybe a fraction flat. Let's keep going a bit. Yeah, okay, they're a tiny bit flat, so I will bring them closer. Now, to do this, I would advise that you slacken the strings off. Now that's a pain because it means you're going to have to stretch out a bit of slack again. But people, it's too easy to want to sort of go dashing ahead and do the adjustment. So we said they're too flat, so we want to come forward a bit. Yeah, so it's a bit tempting to sort of just do them under load, but the problem with doing them under load is that they are just waiting to strip the screw heads and so forth. It's just not a good idea. So I strongly recommend slacking the things off. Now I'm just going to pull these forward a little bit more, and if we get the right place to start, I think we should kind of pretty much be able to predict the fall of all the saddles from there. You know, it's not the end of the world, so we can now tune up again. The first fret action is very low at the moment, so what I'll do is I'll just double check it. It's also very low when the neck isn't loaded. again, I like to support that. I hate putting the jack down, the socket down on, bending it. It's guaranteed to loosen up your jack socket, which is something you really don't want to do unless you want to get handy with a soldering iron. So I'm just stretching the strings again just to pull out the slack that loosening them gave us back when we tightened it up, so it doesn't hurt to do that. Now we can work off the we'll tune it up now so it wants to run away. Yeah, good. We're on the mark. So you saw that I adjusted all of them in relation to each other. So and that sort of backs up my thing that I always say about trusting the pattern, which is always for a good quality set of strings from a reliable manufacturer. You expect to see for a set with 3 plain and 3 wound, you expect to see 2 groups of 3 staggered, and if you don't see that, it's usually a string that's duff. It's quite common, so I always say throw that away. If you get one of them intonates in the wrong place, throw that string away, get a new one. Oh, lovely. There we have it, intonated, and there is the setup of the wonderful Rally GL300 in emerald green. Lovely, lovely jubbly. Now with this fabulous tremolo, see, look, fingerprints, anything glossy gets sticky very easily. Yeah, so when it comes to this tremolo, you can, I'll now zoom in so you can actually see it, and I won't shake everything around like a fool. So there it is, so you can get a good look at it. See how it sits on one stop bar post and the other stop bar post. Underneath the spring is a little felt pad, so that bolts straight to there. You do get some, you get a metric and nuts, bolts, what are they called? No, yes, bolts. You get metric ones of those, and which is what we needed for this, and you also get imperial ones for a Gibson. So we've just used the metric ones. Sits on there perfectly well. We've screwed it down without any additional washers, because all the washers will do is raise this up, and we want the this sort of break angle, which is now much less than it was actually for the original position of the original stop bar. So actually this kind of works better with this neck rake. And then we've added the roller bridge and intonated it into our familiar pattern of one group of 3, step forward, next group of 3, and they all step back from each other as we come across. So that is the main modifications here, and it's a lovely simple arm. I mean, beautiful. So there we have it, the emerald green Rally GL300. I would like to own this one, but there we go. David's the collector. He'll be the curator of the overall collection in Britain of lovely rallies. And there we have them. Gorgeous thing. Very low action on this right now. Beautiful. Great guitar. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I will see you at the next one. And if you can just see this, there's my templates. 3 P90s I've decided on for this beastie here. Big chunk of cherry. And I'm toying with the idea, and if you can see, I want a strap carve. So on the back we're going to have the belly carve. We want a forearm carve. We want a rolled edge, a quarter inch router roll off all the way round. So really vintage strap rounded edge. But I quite like on the Firebirds the raised centerpiece, and I'm wondering whether it can work with this rolled off forearm slope. And I'm trying to visualize what it will do, and I think it will work. It will just kind of scrape away the end bit of the central plateau. But that central plateau comes up brilliantly on the kit Firebirds that I've done in the past. It makes a really nice kind of visual thing, as well as being a feature of different elevation. You've got a sort of, three-dimensionality to it. So I'm hoping to do all of that. So obviously I've just been there you go. That's sort of where to start off with. I'm going to go for a thinner body. Obviously at its very thickest in the middle section it will be standard, but everywhere else it will be a sort of 39, because it's quite a big body and I don't want it to be massively overpowering the neck in terms of weight. I don't want it to be a killer in terms of weight. So it's going to be a 39 for the bulk of the body, and it will have the forearm carve, and that's obviously where the forearm curve will interfere with this thing. It will sort of run into that, and I'm pretty certain that it will just roll it off acceptably. It won't upset that nice sort of central platform that you get with a Firebird. So that's my plan, and I'm also, because of the two different heights, if I go with that, and the surface, the front side has two different heights, then I'm going to have to roll off the high fingerboard, the high plateau bit first. That's where I've drawn those little red things. I have to go route that bit first with the 1/4 inch edge router, just to put a roll off, and then I have to somehow make it join as we drop down 3 mils, and then I need the rest of that to be rolled off as well. But obviously I can't do them at the same time at different heights, because it will just fall down a edge. Anyway, you don't really care about that because you were here for the GL300. But anyway, that's my 3 P90s. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make them all stacked, and I want to have a, what do they call it, spinner split. So I want them to go from stacked to single coil with a rotary wind. So down there in the control cavity, that curved bit down there, there's going to be 3 controls in a line: volume, tone, and then this blend pot, which I'm hoping, if I can do it, will do all 3 at the same time. Now I have a slight feeling that this is a tricky bit of electronics, because I know that a guitar I had in the past called the Vintage AV6 did it. But what I never knew was whether it did all 3 simultaneously using one pot, and I can't quite see how that works, or whether it only did 2 of them and one of them stayed stacked. I don't know, so I'm looking into the possibilities of that. But there we have 5-way switch, master volume, master tone, some sort of blend to split, if I can do it. I have found some kind of unusual 3-gang rotary potentiometers from one of the online kind of grown-up electronics supply people. But if anyone knows a reliable way to progressively roll off or split spin a split, or whatever they call it, or typically American thing, spin a split. It's quite simple to how you roll off a rotary potentiometer. It can be turned into a gradual, progressive send to ground for the second part of the coil, or the second coil. That's sort of understandable, but my problem is what happens if you make the mistake of joining all 3. I don't think it does. I think that messes up the whole selector switch business. I'm not that great an expert to know, so if you have any good ideas about that, if I take this nice still shot here now, I can grab it and put a post on it on Facebook, and yeah, ask the question, get some answers. Rightio, thank you for watching. I'm off. It's Friday night. I'm going to go and watch some YouTube junk and rest my back, which is improving, thank goodness. See you soon.